Good day, good morning, good evening. We've lit our candle from all those of the Abdominal Therapy Collective, all those who are present here today. We open this annual honor of our mentor, Don Elijio Panti, the Maya shaman of Belize. In the name of the Father and of the Mother, the Holy Spirit, in the name of Ixchel and the Maya spirits. I ask for your presence today to join us in celebrating and honoring the precious, useful service life of Don Elijio Panti, who gave so much to his people and now to the world. Don Elijio showed us the way to be true healers, to sacrifice in the name of healing, and to understand plants, how they work on the human body, to use so many different modalities, and also to understand the spiritual ailments that people bring to our doorstep. So I ask for the intercession of our guardian angels, the Maya spirits, and Ixchel, to join us today, to watch over us, to guide us, and to illuminate the lamps of our hearts. And thank you, Don Elijio Panti, for your life, for your humor, for your service, for all that you taught us. Amen. Our little altars everywhere. It's a very special occasion for us. This is the 30th year of Don Elijio's passing. He passed away in February of 1996 at the age of 103. He was born in Guatemala in 1893. So 1893 to 1996. Don Elijio lived the first 2 years of his life in Guatemala and then came to Belize in his mother's arms when he was only 2 years old, and lived the rest of his time in the little village of San Antonio. So this is my altar at home, this larger one. Where's my cursor? Nobody sees the cursor? I don't even see it. Back. And this little altar is one of the smaller one on the left is our Primicia altar for the last one in the solstice ceremony. And of course, ever-present marigolds, favorite plant of Maya healers, Miss Hortense and Don Elijio Panti. So for those of you who may not be familiar, this is Central America. There. Anybody know why my cursor's not working? Let's see. All right, you can see on the left is Central America, and the little red area there is Belize. And this is a map of the nation of Belize. And in the very middle of Belize, where you see the big red area, that's where I live, and Don Elijio lived in Cayo District, which is only about maybe 10 miles from Guatemala, where Don Elijio was born in the Petén. So at the time Don Elijio was born in 1893, Belize was still British Honduras. And when I came to Belize in 1976, it was still British Honduras until independence in 1982. Now, there is a very famous book that was stored in the Vatican for 400 years. And finally, one of the priests who worked at the Vatican in Rome went through the old dusty Vatican attic and pulled out this book from 1532, known as the Bodianus manuscript. I always loved this because I think the old guy looks a lot like Don Elijio, old and thin, and he's preparing medicine, and there is his apprentice, a young woman. You can see some very familiar plants here. This is the oldest American herbal. This was done in Mexico City by the Spanish friars. with the information that was given to them on the ethnobotany of the area from a young apprentice to one of the healers of old Tenochtitlan at that time. So the friars set about to do drawings of every one of the plants that the young man described to them. My cursor's not working, but I could point out, you see up there at the upper right-hand side, you can see the aloe vera plant. And way down at the left on the third column up from the left, you can see the nopal tree there. So I just want us to be aware that America has the oldest herbal ever printed, actually printed by the friars in 1532, known as the Bodianus manuscript. And this is Don Elijio in the 1940s. This is a picture taken at the Tikal Maya temple. He was a member of the crew that was digging out the stones and the rubble of this ancient temple that was stopped functioning sometime around 900, like all the other Maya temples. So Don Elijio was one of the workers, and this photograph I just happened to notice when I was at a lodge called Blancano Lodge up in the Mountain Pine Ridge that has a wall of old Belize photographs. And I looked at the group of men who were working on the temple site, and I noticed that face looks very familiar. And yes, it was Don Elijio Panti when he still had dark hair. And he was probably at this age, I would think about maybe 40. This was in the 40s. He was born in 1893, so he was somewhere in his 40s. And this is another photograph a dear friend of mine took of Don Elijio before I arrived in Belize sometime in the 1970s. I'd say here he was probably about 60. I think he just looked so adorable holding that little bunch of plants in his hand. And the shirt he's wearing is one of the very last shirts that his wife, Gomercinda, sewed for him before she passed away. He only wore her homemade shirts. And this is a close-up of that photograph. So you see Don Elijio had a very Maya visage. If you remember some of the glyphs of the ancient Maya, the large, long nose is part of their DNA. And I always thought Don Elijio looked like he could have posed for one of those temple site stone carvings. This is Don Elijio as he was when I first met him in 1982, maybe 83. I always forget whether it was 82 or 83. We came to Belize in 1982, so I probably met him in 1983. I was searching for a teacher of medicinal plants of Belize. I already knew quite a bit about Central American plants because I had lived for 10 years in Mexico before I came to Belize. But this was a new country. It was a Caribbean country, really more Caribbean than Central America. And I was unfamiliar with a lot of the medicinal plants. So here and there, I heard people say, oh, you have to go see the old maestro in San Antonio. The one you have to go see, numero uno. You have to go see El Mero. You have to go see the very one, the number one, Don Elijio Panti of San Antonio. And then many other people said, oh, don't go see him. Be careful. That old man is a lecher. Don't know what would happen to you if you get involved with him. He is an enchanter of women. He is a witch doctor. Stay away from Don Elijio Panti. Well, in my time as a healer, I know that people have said the same thing about me. I was not going to listen to that, and that I would be my own judge, that I would visit Don Elijio if I could figure out. And then lo and behold, he came to find me. He showed up on my doorstep in San Ignacio at my little clinic. My husband and I had already established by 1983, and he came to my clinic because he had heard that there was an American herbalist in town, and he wanted to know, did I have any linden flower tea, flor de tilo. He said he needs flor de tilo because he cannot sleep since his wife passed away. I was already fluent in Spanish at this time because of my 10 years of living in Mexico. So we were conversing a little bit. I really did not know who he was. He said, ever since my wife died, I cannot sleep. He said, when my wife was alive, I had a lovely blanket of guts. Now all I have is a blanket of wool. If I turn over in the middle of the night in my hammock, that blanket falls to the floor. And there's me, Don Elijio, all by myself, shivering. When my wife was alive, she would turn over and pull me to her and warm up my back with her blanket of guts. No more blanket of guts for Don Elijio. So I need some of that linden flower tea. Do you have any? And as a matter of fact, I did, because it happens to be one of my favorite plants. So I always give homage to linden flower because it really is one of the ways that Don Elijio and I came together. So I gave him a bag of the tea, and I said, oh, by the way, what's your name? And he said, I'm Don Elijio Panti. I said, Don Elijio Panti of San Antonio? He said, yes, right here, neither more nor less. I said, well, I've been looking for you. Why? He said, I told him, I really need a teacher of the medicinal plants of Belize. Can I come visit you in your village? He said, of course, come. So I went probably 10 times before he knew me or he remembered who I was. At the time, Don Elijio was already going somewhat blind. So every time I went, 1 week, 1 day of every week for the next 6 or 8 weeks, he always said, oh, but your face is like a mask, so I can't really see who you are. Finally, after the 8th visit or so, he said, oh, you're the lady from America. You're the lady who gave me the linden flower tea. Yes, Don Elijio. I'm here to see if I could possibly come to take lessons on the medicinal plants of Belize. No, he said, I couldn't do that. Why not, Don Elijio? Because he said, everything I teach you would be lost up there. And I said, why do you think that would be? And he said, because you don't have a sastoon. What is a sastoon? Turns out the sastoon is the little magic instrument of the Maya shamans. He said, if you had a sastoon, I would be able to teach you, but you don't have a sastoon, so I can't teach you. So I was undeterred, and nevertheless, I showed up at his doorstep every single week for the next year. And these are the huts that Don Elijio lived in when I first met him. There is his little stone cottage to the left that his children built for him after his wife, Gomercinda, passed away, so that he would have better protection and more warmth. The little straw thatch hut made of sticks and straw, that was where he and his wife lived for 50 years. The one behind me was his kitchen. So they lived in those 2 huts together until she passed away. After that, that hut to the front became the place where his clients and patients slept if they couldn't make it home the same day, or if they came from Honduras or Nicaragua, from way up north in Mexico. He would often put them up, and that was the little hut that they slept in. And that hut lasted about 75 years. Pretty amazing for a little grass hut. And so I always thought it looked like the house of the three pigs, the house of stone, the house of straw, and the house of wood. And this is a little fire hearth. That was his wife's kitchen stove. And that was the kitchen stove that was in his little kitchen when I first knew him. That's the stove that I cooked the herbal remedies on. that I toasted the jackass bitters to make his wound powder on. And he was unable, after a while, when I met him, he was already 90 years old, and he was becoming rather arthritic and rheumatic. So he was unable to collect firewood after that. So one of my jobs, even before he agreed to take me on as a student, was to collect what is known as widow's wood. Widow's wood means there are women around Central America who no longer have husbands to chop wood for them. So they go around the village picking up fallen branches and other pieces of wood that have just dried up, left on the roadside. So that's what I did. I collected widow's wood because I also did not know how to yield an axe to chop wood. But there is a fire hearth. Don Elijio built that little fire hearth made of wood you can see on the bottom, and then filled in with dirt and plaster on the top. And this is his little clinic in San Antonio, in the little stone house. You see it was never actually finished. And you see the little ball of the wild yam, the root, that on the far right-hand corner. That is the Mexican wild yam, from which the birth control pill and cortisone were both produced. It was discovered in the 1940s by an ethnobotanist who went to study plants with the Nahuatl Indians in southern Mexico, around Guerrero and in the area where Acapulco is. And he was searching for a plant that would provide a steroid molecule that could lead them, hopefully, to a birth control pill. They had to find a steroid that they could then work on in the laboratory to produce a hormone that would halt female ovarian cycles, or change the ovarian cycles. So he saw a group of women in the field digging up these roots when they were very young and eating them raw like potatoes. Russell Marker was the scientist, and he said to the women, "Why are you doing this? What good is it? Why is it only the women?" And they giggled and blushed and blushed and giggled. And one lady said, "Look, Gringo, we'll tell you if you promise not to tell the men and if you leave." So he said, "All right, I'll leave if you tell me." And they told him that they were eating the raw Mexican wild yam in its very young state in order to prevent pregnancy, and that the eating of a yam would last for 3 months. And every 3 months they had a fresh crop. So Russell Marker gathered up 200 pounds of the tubers, took them to Mexico City, and 20 years and $20 million later, the first birth control pills came out and were shamefully tested on the women in Puerto Rico. Many of them died of blood clots. Many of them suffered sicknesses for the rest of their lives until the scientists could figure out what was the proper dose and what was the proper balance of estrogen and progesterone. So although we are grateful for the birth control pill, it does also have a rather dark history of how it was finally manipulated into a drug. So all those sacks contain Don Elijio's medicines, and that little stool is where he sat for probably 40 or 50 years listening to client stories. And this is inside one of Don Elijio's little huts. The plants on the floor are jackass bitters, which got to be one of my most famous plants, most favorite plants that Don Elijio taught me about. Jackass is an antiviral, antimicrobial, antiparasitic, and anti-malarial, antiviral. So it's one of our most useful plants in the Rainforest Remedies line of products. And we use it in Flu Away. We use it in our now famous Herbal Warrior. We use it in the Female Tonic. It's in probably 6 or 7 of our basic formulas because it is so active, so useful, and so safe. And I want to point out the chair. That is the chair that Don Elijio used to do his abdominal massage. You see how it's bent, leaning backwards, so the client could lay down on that chair and the abdomen would be better exposed. So Don Elijio designed and had that chair built, and he used that, I would think, for about 70 years. And it was still there when I got there. So there we are, looking at some of his plants and doing the peeling the jackass bitters off the stems in order to roast it over that comal to turn it into what Don Elijio called a wound powder. He's the only healer I ever knew who made his own wound powder that was used specifically on really bad, stubborn, open, infected sores that just did not respond to the usual treatments of herbal baths or creams. So he turned that, roasted it and roasted it. That's what I did after he accepted me as his apprentice, because it was too hard on him to was very acrid because of the active bitter principles in jackass bitters. So I would have to toast it and roast it in the heat at about 95 degrees outside until it turned into a black powder. And that was sprinkled on the worst diabetic sores and on infected wounds that were stubborn to heal. I remember one lady from Dangriga who had had a diabetic ulcer sore for 12 years. And she came into Don Elijio's clinic. It was on her lower leg, which is common because the sores below the knees and below the elbows are the hardest to heal, it turns out. So this sore was about the size of a pancake. And she had it wrapped up in a white cloth, like a rag. And when she undid that rag, we both absolutely gasped. It was deep and red and oozing and so sore. He washed it with jackass bitters, and then he covered it with castor oil and then sprinkled the wound powder of just jackass bitters over it. Gave her the instructions to wash it twice daily and do that same dressing of castor oil and jackass bitters burnt powder. And she came back 3 months later and it was 90% healed. It was also a round sore. So the hardest sores to heal are those below the knees that are round. That puts it way up to the scale of 90 or so on hard to heal. So there's our jackass bitters and Don Elijio's abdominal massage chair. This is where he sat for 40 or so years after I met him. I met him in 83. He passed away in 96. So he sat here for 13 years. This is the house he lived in after his wife passed away. And that was the table I sat at in the corner of the screen there, and where Don Elijio sat to welcome his clients. It was always a routine of, come in. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from Corozal. And why are you here? What's your problem? They would tell him they have a stomach ache, or they have chronic headaches, or maybe they have some evil magic on them. And then Don Elijio would say prayers for everybody. Every client got a series of prayers. Don Elijio taught me 18 different prayers that would address specific ailments. And they were all said into the wrist, 3 in the right wrist, 3 prayers in the left, and 3 prayers over the forehead. And whether that was a spiritual or a physical ailment, each of those ailments had its own specific prayer. And the prayers were said 9 times. People would get baths. They would get herbal remedies. They might get the abdominal massage. They might get acupuncture with his stingray spines. They might get cupping with his little kitchen glass and herbal baths. So it was a good range of natural therapies that Don Elijio was able to do. And he always said to the very end, I give people herbs I give them teas, I give them baths, I give them massage, but we must make our client laugh. Laughter is the best medicine. He said, most people think too much. If you can get them to laugh, half their trouble and sickness will go away, and the blessed herbs will do the rest. So after all that routine, after he handed out the herbs to the person, gave them their instructions, how to prepare the teas or the powders, then he would start his routine. He was like an actor. He called himself the Dr. Clown. And he said, if I had to make a choice to be a doctor or a clown, I'd much rather be a clown, because if you make people laugh, they get well. And so he would start telling his stories, and his stories were always funny. And most of the time, he was the brunt of the joke in his stories. He had a whole range of 5 or 7 stories that he told over and over again. And people would laugh so hard, they would say, Don Elijio, stop, stop. My stomach hurts. I can't possibly laugh so much. I'm too sick. Then he would say to me, you see how I'm getting so old now and my eyesight is so bad? I can't even recognize you until I hear your voice. One of these days, if you see me outside with my arms wrapped around a tree, kissing it, you better come get me. I probably think it's a woman, not a tree. And he used to go around the village on Sunday afternoons looking for a new wife. After Chinda passed away in the 70s, maybe like 73, he was, of course, very lonely. And so he started visiting the widows in his town. He would get dressed up on Sunday, put on his hat, put in his teeth, put on his rings, and his last white shirt that Chinda sewed for him, and his shoes, and go visit the widows. And he would sit there, chat them up, and look around to see how they were doing financially, and what kind of things they might need. And he would say to them, I see your need. I want to explain to you my need. I'm an old man, but I'm not poor. And I can take care of you. I'll buy your children shoes and send everybody to school. I need a companion. I need someone to help me administer my home. And then he said to me, and then she looks at me and says, marry you? You're an old man. I don't want an old man. And I looked at her and I said, yes, senora, I'm old, but my money's not old. That always made everybody laugh. Then he used to say, me, I could make the dead laugh. Now that's a good statement. I could make the dead laugh. And then during the 1980s, there was a TV program in Belize known as Belize All Over. And they contacted me to see if they could do their very first program. They were doing a series of programs about Belize, in Belize, one different program every week for a year. So Don Elijio was going to be the very first inaugural program about Belizeans. And so the TV crew came. They made a lovely film about Don Elijio. It's on YouTube. It's Don Elijio Panti in San Antonio, I think is how you would find it. You can see Don Elijio live and talking on that video. So it happened that he was visiting a friend of his in a town close to me. He was not in San Antonio at this time. On this day, he was visiting a friend, known also as Doña Rosa. And I got word that he was visiting Doña Rosa in Benque Viejo, del Carmen. And I thought, well, I'll go visit him there. So when I got there, I sat down in the living room, and Doña Rosa, who he was visiting, got her new TV that very day. Don Elijio and I and Doña Rosa sat down to turn on the TV just to watch it, because Don Elijio had never seen the TV before. And as we turned it on, there was Don Elijio on Belize All Over, and the entire program showed, and it was amazing. His first time to watch TV, and he was on the television. And his statement was, wow, that machine didn't forget a single thing we said that day. So when Don Elijio became elderly, I would say, well, he was elderly when I met him. He was 90, but around the age of 95 or 96, he took a really bad chest condition. And it went on for a very long time till finally he just couldn't get up to see his clients anymore. So I went to take care of him for a week and take care of his clients as well. I would give him a massage. I patted his chest. I gave him teas to loosen the phlegm, said prayers for him, and tried my best to take care of his clinic, which would see 30 clients a day and sometimes 100 people a week. Well, this lady from down south in Dangriga came to visit Don Elijio, and she came into the clinic. It was only her in the clinic with me and Don Elijio behind the curtain asleep. I had just given him tea, gave him his massage, and put him to bed. And she said, where the old man? And I said, the old man is asleep. He's not well. He's been ill for a while. And I just put him to sleep, so we can't disturb him. He hasn't been seeing patients all week. And she looked at me and I said, can I help you? And she said, I'm not here to see the branch. I'm here to see the trunk. And I said, well, I'm sorry, the trunk is asleep and the trunk is resting. And she said, go in there, wake him up. I'm going to go wake him up right now. And I said, don't. So I stood by the curtain with my arms out guarding so she couldn't get into the room. Here comes Don Elijio out the room, and he's kind of staggering. And he said, oh, Rosita, Rosita. And he's in his shorts and his little t-shirt. And he said, Rosita, I died. And I went right to heaven. And would you believe it? There in heaven was St. Peter. And St. Peter looked at me and he said, where have you been, old man? We've been looking for you for a long time. You should have been up here a long time ago. And he said, I know. You know how long you left me alone down there without a wife, without a family? Me, Don Elijio, one, alone at nighttime, all by myself. How could you leave me? And he said, forget about that. Come on in. Get into the heaven, come through the gates. And Don Elijio said, no, wait. He's telling the story. Now, wait, before I go through those gates, I have to ask you something, St. Peter. What's that? Said St. Peter. Well, is there women? Is there dancing? Is there beer? Women, dancing, and beer? No, said St. Peter. And then Don Elijio said, forget it. I'm going back. And he turns to this lady and he said, now, what does this good lady want? What's your problem, dear? And she gave me a look like, see, if he knew it was me, so he got up. So yes, Don Elijio was extremely funny. I think he was the funniest person I ever knew, and I do believe he could make the dead laugh. This is my little huts when I first met Don Elijio in the 1980s. And this is me across the river going for my very first visit to see Don Elijio. And those are our two little huts. And right down in that little blank space in the middle of that photograph is the Macau River. And this is my first trek to San Antonio, and which I got absolutely terribly lost. It, instead of the usual 2-hour walk, it turned into a 4-hour walk, but eventually I learned how to get there without getting lost. And so this is old East Shell Farm. You can see our little water tank right there, a gray spot between the two huts. And that's where we collected rainwater, and that's where we did our baths, and it was our source of water until we were able to build a pump to bring water up from the river. And Don Elijio, when I first met him, lived with his grandchildren. He had only one child, a girl, who had 5 children, but died in childbirth as a result of being kicked to death by her very cruel, very violent husband. And the wife, the daughter and her husband lived in the same compound as Don Elijio. And Don Elijio could often hear her crying out at nighttime, being beaten by this husband. And he said, let me in, let me in. I will take care of this. You don't have to live this way. I'll take care of you and the children. But she always refused until one night, Don Elijio said he just could not do it anymore. So he burst into their home with the axe. And when the cruel husband saw Don Elijio burst into the house with his axe ready to kill, to save his daughter, who was on the floor 5 months pregnant and bleeding because she had been kicked so much by this crazy man. He jumped out the window to get away from Don Elijio. Don Elijio ran after him and chased him for 2 days, but he could never find him, never saw him again. But Don Elijio said if he ever did, he definitely would have probably killed him, even if he had to go to jail. So his only daughter died a few days later and gave birth to that last baby. And Don Elijio was able to raise all 6 of his grandchildren with his wife until she passed away. So in the end, he had one of the grandsons became his companion and caretaker. And so he lived with the grandson, and that is his great-granddaughter there. So Don Eligio's life had many aspects of sadness to it. And he always said, ¿No ves que mi vida es triste? Do you see how sad is my life? And this is the photograph that was taken by my friend Carol Becker, who was the art director at the Chicago Museum of Art. And this is Don Elijio at the age of 87. And I just thought it was probably one of the best photographs ever taken. This is Don Elijio in the bush collecting his most precious plant known as skunk root or zorillo. Now, after a full year, Don Elijio agreed to take me on as a student. How it happened was I arrived at his doorstep a full year, almost exactly to the day that I first arrived. And when he refused to teach me because, number one, you're a gringa and everything I teach you would be lost up there in the north. And number two, you don't have a sastun. Well, I didn't even know what a sastun was, but he explained to me that that is the magic instrument that gives the Maya shaman or the Hamen the ability to communicate with the Maya spirits, which he named the benevolent 9 Maya spirits. He said that they are not God, but they are the right hands of God. The Maya spirits are Chak, the rain god, Ishkel, the goddess of medicine and healers, the god of waters of the world, the god and goddess of the forest. So after this full year, I arrive at his doorstep and he gave me, it was very early when I arrived, so he hadn't even opened his door yet. When he opened his door, I was standing on his doorstep. And the look he gave me was so devastating. The look said, oh my God, she's here again. And I thought, okay, I'm done. I'm never coming back. So he said, I don't have time for you today. I've been busy all week harvesting my corn, and I haven't had time to hardly take care of my clients. So I'm too busy today. I don't have time. So I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm going to harvest the last of the mazorcas, the last corn. I said, well, I'll help you. And he said, you're from Chicago. What do you know about harvesting corn? And I said, Don Elijio, I lived 10 years in Mexico. I know how to harvest corn. Let's go. I'll give you a hand. So he gave me one of those Maya baskets. I put it around my forehead and I followed him to his milpa, which was a 90-minute walk from the village. And when we get there, he said, okay, here we are. And I look around and I don't see anything but bush. He said, no, get on your belly. So we crawled on our bellies for about 30 feet through the bush. And when I came out of the bush, there was the cornfield hidden by the bush because he said people steal corn and beans and pumpkins. So he was trying to protect it. So when I came out and I looked up, here is a hillside, like a mountain. Almost the hill was so big, it was a small mountain. And the entire hill is covered in his corn and beans and pumpkin. It was actually the last time Don Elijio planted a milpa. So we begin harvesting corn. I'm tossing the corn cobs and loading up, making a pile, tossing corn cobs and making a pile. Finally, at about 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, he's coming this way on one row of corn. I'm coming the other way, and we meet in the middle. And he looks at my pile of corn. He looks at my basket full of corn, and he said, "Are you married?" I said, "Yes, Don Elijio, I'm married and I have 3 children." And he said, "Oh." So at around maybe an hour later, we take a little break and I've got an orange. Now we're sitting up at the very top of the hill. I have an orange. I peel the orange and I give him half. And he stood up and he said, "¿Qué es que tú quieres?" What is it that you want? And I said, "Don Elijio, I promise to work hard, be a good student, and take care of you as much as I can if you will only teach me about the medicinal plants of Belize." That's when he said, "Do you promise?" And just as he said that, the sun rose up behind him because we're on a high hill. The sun is just coming up, and he is completely enveloped in a gold sparkling medallion of sunlight, and it's just sparkling all over him. He said, "Do you promise if I take the time to teach you, you will take care of my people when I'm gone?" Gulp. Yes, Don Elijio, I promise. And so that was the first day of my 13-year apprenticeship with Don Elijio, in which on the way home, he began to teach me about the medicinal plants. And it continued for the next 13 years. And here, collecting Zorillo was something. This was one of the very, very first days. This photograph was taken in the high bush. You can see it's pretty dark up there, but it is daylight. And he said that this was the largest skunk root he had ever collected in his life. He was so impressed. And the skunk root was very special and necessary for Don Elijio's practice because he was the shaman. And as the shaman, he would treat both physical and spiritual ailments. And the spiritual ailments were treated with this root known as skunk root. Now, skunk root, as you see at the bottom there on the right-hand side, is a underground mesh of thick black roots that smell like a skunk when you break it or scratch it, just like a skunk. So it's paiche in Maya, which means something like skunk tree, and then skunk root in English, and Petiveria, Chiococa alba in Latin. This is the plant that he used to dispel evil magic, like that people would do on other people as a result of envy, jealousy, anger, and resentment. So in order to dispel evil magic, he would give people a potion made of this root. He said this was the largest skunk root he had ever collected on this hillside. After 50 years of nearly daily collections, he had never seen a root this large. And he said, "That's because you're here today, Rosita." And I said, "Why would that possibly be?" And he said, "Because Ixchel, the goddess of medicine and the patrona, the boss of all the healers, the guardian of all the healers, smiles more and assists a male herb collector more if he is in the forest with the woman." And that was the very first time I had ever heard the name Ixchel. And so there you can see what skunk root looks like. Don Elijio was very, very proud. And that took 5 days of returning to the same site, digging up that black root system for 5 days. And that, I guess, would have been, I think we got 15 sacks of skunk root medicine from that. So skunk root has what is a very interesting doctrine of signature. The doctrine of signature is a concept in herbology that proposes that many plants have clues to help you understand how you could use them on the human body. That might be color, that might be location, that might be some shape, that might be some smell. In this case, this doctrine of signature is really fascinating to me because it's used to overpower what we might think of as black magic. Now, the root is very dark, like those dark forces, very hidden, like the occult forces. You have to really dig deep down to get this root system up. And when it comes up, it really stinks. It's foul. Also, again, signifying the way people harm each other doing those evil spells. Now, that's the root system. Above the root grows vines and leaves. The flowers are white and the berries are white and sweet. To me, that always signified light over darkness, prayer and faith over evil doing. That's what I think is the doctrine of signature of this magnificent plant. And this is Ischel. It's a name that I had never heard before. When he said, the reason I found this big skunk root is because you're here, because Ischel smiles on the male collector if he's with the woman. And I said, who's Ischel? First time I heard her name. And that set me off on a 40-year research project. I have never stopped looking into, learning about, and collecting images of Ischel. If you go to the web now and you look up Ischel, you would be there for weeks going through all of the pages and all of the information and images of Ischel. In the beginning, there was nothing. No, your search has no results would be the usual answer if you put in Ischel. That would have been in the 1980s and 1990s. Now her image is spread all over the world. This is the maiden goddess as the goddess of all weavers. And there she sits in front of her backstrap loom, weaving the universe from day to day. The snake on her forehead is a symbol of medicine and knowledge. And here's another image of Ischel from one of the ancient Maya vases. There you see her sitting in the moon because she was the moon goddess. She was the goddess of fertility and the goddess of childbirth. She really was not only a goddess, she was the creator, the creatrix of the Maya people, along with her partner, Itzamna. I always felt it was so meaningful to me that the Maya pantheon had a god and a goddess as the creators. To me, it just made so much sense. Once I realized that Ischel was the creatrix with her partner, that there was a male and a female at the top hierarchy of all these other gods and goddesses of the Maya, and that the Maya people believed that these two were the creators. It clicked. And I have loved and adored and worshiped Ischel ever since. And I have to say unequivocally, this is the closest spiritual connection to a deity I've ever experienced in my life. I know she answers our prayers. I know that she watches over us, and I feel that she's there. So Don Elijio said, if a healer collects plants like the Zorio, that you must say the herb collector's prayer before you take the plant from the soil. If you don't say the herb collector's prayer, the spirit of the plant will not follow you home to do the healing. And this is the prayer that he taught me. In the name of God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, I take the life of this plant and I give thanks to its spirit. I am Don Elijio, the one who walks in the mountains collecting medicine to heal the ailments of the people. I have faith with all my heart that this plant will heal the sickness of the people. Now, this is so common sense, something I had never thought about before. But ever since I watched Don Elijio pick up his axe, and the moment his axe or his pick hit the earth, he would say this prayer out loud in Maya, sometimes in Spanish. Never, obviously, in English, because he didn't speak English. But it made me think that it was the most honorable way to be in right relationship with plants. Ever since then, I have never, ever cut or pinched or dug up a plant without first standing there for just a moment. And this is what we teach in our Wisdom of Water, Plants, and Prayer spiritual healing class. Is first we stand in front of the plant or the flower, whatever it might be, for just a few moments until we feel a connection. And it is there if you steady yourself, close your eyes, take a breath, and you feel an energetic vibration that comes from the plant. And I always, always say the prayer. And when I say the prayer of faith and thanksgiving to the plant, I believe with all my heart, as Don Elijio taught, that the very spirit, the very essence, the energy of the plant follows you home to do the healing. He always said, many people come here and they see the plants that I collect. They see the plants that I use in my healing. And they go home and they try to do the same thing with the same plants, but it doesn't work because they did not say the prayer of faith and thanksgiving to the plant before they took it from the earth. So it's something to keep in mind if you want a plant to be a companion healer for you, whatever it is, always, always give thanks and state your faith before you take any part of the plant. And here is an ancient sculpture of a plant spirit coming out of a lotus. So the Maya really actually could characterize and personalize a Maya spirit coming out of a plant. I just thought this was so, so beautiful. It always makes me feel speechless and breathless. What a magnificent sculpture, and so beautifully rendered, so simple, with his little arms crossed and that peaceful look on the gods. Maybe a goddess, it's probably a god. I don't see any boobies. And so this is Don Elijio and I coming home from one of our very early days in the forest, and we're hauling our medicine home. And on the very first day that he agreed to take me as his student, it was absolute heaven and music to my ears. We're walking along this trail, and he would say, you see this little plant? This one is called a nal. That's the one we use for skin conditions, rashes, and sores. You see that vine? That's man vine, bejuco de hombre. We use that for all manner of different types of stomach ailments and gastritis. And that plant over there, that's jackass bitters, tres puntas. Little did I know what a great role tres puntas was going to play in my life. And then we would carry this medicine home. There he is carrying a stick of wood home for his little fireplace, and that is the little hillside outside of his cottage. Then we would unload our bags onto his dirt floor and spend the afternoon chopping medicine. Now, chopping medicine with Don Elijio would last from, we'd get back from the bush at 11 or 12. His grandchildren brought him his lunch. He would eat. Sometimes the outside area of his house would be, there would be 30 or 40 people waiting for him. No exaggeration. Always there were some people waiting for him. And he would call them in one by one, listen to their ailments, give them their bags of medicine, and then maybe do an abdominal massage for the women, lifting the uterus. And then he would start his jokes and stories. And then for the rest of the afternoon, he and I sat for 3, 4, 5 hours chopping the medicine that we had collected that morning. And that time is when I heard all of Don Elijio's life stories. So he loved to talk. Don Elijio was one of the best talkers ever knew in my life, and one of the funniest people I ever knew in my life as well. So it was an absolute charm and delight to spend afternoons with him. When he took me on as his apprentice, I spent 3 nights and 4 days with him for 7 years. And I always walked to his clinic. It was go down the hill from my little farm, cross the river on foot, and walk 5 miles to San Antonio. And then there, once I was in San Antonio, I would spend 3 nights and 4 days, and then walk home at the end of the 4th day. And during the night, Don Elijio would 7 o'clock, he closed all the doors and windows because there's no way he was going to let in the night wind. He was very superstitious and afraid of the viento de la noche, the night wind. So always the doors and windows, no matter how hot it was, had to be closed. I slept in one hammock. He slept in a hammock behind the curtain. And the curtain was the last piece of embroidery that his wife did before she died. And the embroidery was of 2 blue doves sitting on a branch of roses. And underneath it said, lovers forever, amantes para siempre. And that was the curtain between our 2 hammock spaces. So we went to bed in the hammock at 7 p.m. and Don Elijio did not stop talking until 3 a.m. And so again, that's how I learned so much about his life. So when it came time to sit down and write the personal narrative of my 7 years, because at the end of Sastun, my apprenticeship with the Maya healer, Don Elijio still alive. So at the end of 7 years, I wrote Sastun, just sharing stories about what it was like to be a Maya shaman's apprentice. And because I had listened to so many daytime stories, so many nighttime stories, it was like a tape recorder just ran off in my head. I heard every story that I reported 200 times, but it was great comfort to Don Elijio to have someone to talk to. And then we set out, this is the skunk root, set it out to dry on these plastic bean sacks, and then store them in the same bean sack inside his little hut. Now, as I said, Don Elijio was the funniest person I ever knew in my life. And you see that happy, laughing face there. That is always how I will remember him. I think one of the funniest stories he ever told was how the local evangelical ministers of San Antonio came to visit him several times a year to tell him that he was worshiping the devil, that everything he did with his Maya medicine, the Maya prayers, the herbal baths, even the massage was all devil's work. And that if he wanted to spend the rest of eternity in heaven with his wife, he has to put all this aside. No more healing, no more Maya prayers, no more seeing clients. He has to put it all aside and come to worship at the evangelical church to guarantee his soul would be in heaven forever. Well, Don Elijio was really outraged by them and insulted, as he should be. But in his true spirit of love and humor, this is how he would answer them. So they're sitting in front of me, he would say, and they tell me that I have to put all this aside because I am worshiping the devil. And I say to them, okay, what if I do that? If I do what you suggest, how will I make a living? So I'll tell you what, if you just give me $50 a day, I make a lot more as a healer. But if you just give me $50 a day to live on, I'll do that. I'll put all this aside. But I want your $50 every day, and don't ask me to clap my hands and sing because I have arthritis and I can't clap my hands. Don't ask me to stomp my feet and sing because I can't do that. But if you just leave me alone and give me $50 a day. I'll do that. And every time they just get up and walk away. He loved to tell that one over and over again. Okay. And this is the Primicia ceremony in which Don Elijio accepted me as his disciple and apprentice. He said that he had to do an offering to the benevolent Maya spirits and Ixchel in order to introduce me to the Maya spirits as his apprentice. Otherwise, they would not answer my prayers. They would not be there for me for spiritual healing. So it was essential to have the permission of the Maya spirits. So Don Elijio came to my farm. This was in 1987, and it happened to be the day of the harmonic convergence. The harmonic convergence was in 1987, where the belief was that this was the beginning of the new age, that in 1987, the old ways were going to begin to crumble and a whole new realization of brotherhood, peace, and love was going to happen. It's not here yet, but we're still waiting. So Don Elijio knew about this day, the harmonic convergence, because it actually is a Maya calendar date. And he said that would be the perfect day to have this Primicia ceremony offering that he would do in order to introduce me to his beloved Maya spirits. So he built this little altar. Those 4 legs represent the 4 directions. And the wok under the table has coals in it for burning copal, which is an offering to the Maya spirits. The altar was made with those little sticks that he chopped right out of my forest. And then the 9 gourd bowls that he has had since the 1910s. These gourd bowls were already 70 or 80 years old. So he laid out 9 gourd bowls of corn atole, like a corn cereal. That was 1 gourd bowl for each of the 9 benevolent Maya spirits, who are the overseers and the oversouls of the Maya people. And then Don Elijio did the Cantico, the Primicia chant, which we have done many times a year ever since within the Abdominal Therapy Collective. I like to do 9 a year as a promise. And Don Elijio said that he truly felt the Maya spirits come that day and that they met me, and that from that day on, the Maya spirits know who you are. And he asked them to give me every consideration that they would him. And now Don Elijio is here saying the prayers for this little baby who has what is known as grief, pesar, because his mother is already pregnant with another baby and she had to wean him. So the baby is very sad and crying. Hillary, what time is it? I can't see.
10 past, Rosita.
10 past, all right. So I'm going to end up here and just go through the slides quickly so we can take some Q&A. So he's saying the prayers for this little baby who has pesar, or grief, as a result of having been weaned from the breast. There's Don Elijio Sastun and his little clay jar. These were both teleported. Teleported meaning the clay jar showed up on his doorstep one morning, and the little Sastun showed up in his hammock one day. So that's called teleportation. And it is the Sastun that made Don Elijio able to contact the Maya spirits. And there it is. He was able to read this and find little balls and little lines that gave him answers to questions. And he made many different amulets. Those 2 little black bundles are his Maya amulets, or protecciones, protectors. And the little clay jar, he would enchant them with a Maya prayer so that people who carry those amulets would be protected and aided and assisted by the Maya spirits. There he is rolling his sastun around the amulet and reading the sastun. There it is in my friend's hand. He would take it to the doorway and read the bubbles and lines in the sastun. And there are his acupuncture needles. They were stingray spines. And it turns out that his system of acupuncture is about 80% similar to the Chinese. So when Don Elijio passed away, this was the message in a dream. Take the children as if they were your own, train them and teach them to help each other. So my husband and I started the Children's Bush Medicine Camp in 1998. And this year we had our 28th summer bush medicine camp for children around Belize to learn about bush medicine, medicinal plants, and traditional healing. And there they are, learning, learning how to take care of sprains. Okay, so there we are, Don Elijio Panti. All right.